I've always been very concerned about rural broadband coming from South Dakota, and I'm really looking forward to shining a spotlight this morning on the incredible opportunities that wireless brings to rural America. But the real good news I think we want to focus on today is that the exploding demand we're seeing for wireless data is building a business case for investment like we've never seen before. This may be the time when the networks get built, and for my whole career I've been waiting to get this done, and there have been challenges, but I think that if the regulatory environment supports the build-out and doesn't impede this new business case, that this vastly growing demand for wireless broadband may at long last have brought us to an inflection point. This is an inflection point where there's always been a difficult business case, but when you're in a rural area and there's longer distances, fewer customers, similar fixed costs, it's inherently difficult to build a wireless broadband network. And we're going to hear about that today from Michelle Guite, of course, who's actually doing it. Hilda Legg and I were both administrators of the Rural Utility Service, and we saw firsthand how difficult it was to build this out. Hilda was the pioneer in trying to get broadband done through the Rural Utility Service when it was first begun, I think in 2003, 2004. You even did some experiments before that. That was, I think, a good lesson in how hard it is to find what works. We had a loan program, and so we had to have something that would pay back those loans, and we had to make sure that it was a solid business. And of course, the fact that we had low interest loans helped a lot, and the fact that Universal Service would then support the repayment of those loans. But it wasn't always possible to get it done where we wanted to, and I know that we both ran into examples where it couldn't be done, but that was in the earlier days. And so what we're going to hear about today is that so many different sectors, this exploding demand suddenly is creating potential for revenue, and consumers demanding their wireless broadband that might change all that for the time when we need it. And today we'll of course hear from Chairman Mark Pryor, who heads the subcommittee on communications technology and the internet, who has consistently demonstrated his commitment to rural broadband, and he has a clear vision of the nation's economic development, and certainly the role that broadband expansion will play in making sure that that works. We also are going to have an outstanding panel of experts and leaders in the field of wireless, public safety, agriculture, and education, and we'll hear directly from them how demands in all of these areas are changing the business case for wireless and wireline broadband deployment in rural America. And this cause is really very near and dear to me and to a lot of people in this room. I see a lot of old friends who've dedicated a lot of time and energy to this. By the time I got to the Rural Utility Service at USDA, thanks to Hilda and her predecessors, we had a $60 billion portfolio of loans to rural American for telecommunications, but also electric and water infrastructure. I was fortunate to be there when I was able to spearhead RUS's investment of $3.5 billion into rural broadband infrastructure expansion. Those funds have been put to good use, providing new or improved broadband facilities to 7 million people and businesses and community institutions. And these are the kind of investments that pay off for years to come. Not only do they create jobs that are urgently needed now and were urgently needed when the program was set up, but they built the foundation for continued job creation and economic growth for years to come. Earlier, when I was on the FCC, I fought hard for policies that would deliver broadband to rural America and open the doors of opportunity so there wouldn't be a digital divide, so that we could have everybody in rural America have the same opportunity as the rest of the country, which is what the Telecommunications Act envisioned. And we're still trying to make that vision a reality. And today we're going to talk about how we're going to get that done and some of the people that are actually out there driving that forward. It reminds me of the federal highway system, like the federal highway system that provided that connection and tied the country together in every corner of the country across rural areas. The Rural Electrification Act, which Hilda and I administered, that brought power and prosperity to rural parts of the country. We talked about Texas this morning. The nation's small towns, farms, ranches. I think that broadband infrastructure has the same transformative power that the highway system did before, or that rural electrification did. It's our generation's challenge to take this new technology and bring it everywhere, just as our our predecessors did for highways, for electrification, and before that for canals. And this country's always been about building. We've always gotten it done. And I'm confident and hopeful that we're going to get it done again this time. We've overcome those challenges in the past, and I think this time we know that just as those efforts had improved the nation's economy and ability to compete, so too this broadband expansion that we're talking about is going to make us globally competitive. It's going to make us able to take on the challenges and really in a big way. It's a big undertaking. It's certainly a challenge for those of us who come from rural America and know what we know, these huge swaths of land, some extremely remote and hard to serve areas, making it difficult to deploy broadband. And the way business, of course, works, they deploy their capital to where it's easiest, where they get the best return. That's what our system is all about. So how is it that we can find those returns in rural areas? Well, new developments in a variety of sectors, as I said, are driving demand and making the business case more viable. And maybe we are at the point where we all know how much data is coming over these things. We anticipate 850% increase in data use over the next 5 years alone. And infrastructure is one of the ways that you can meet that burgeoning demand. But the good news about that demand is that it means more revenue for those who build out the systems, more opportunities. So we're going to talk about a number of those. We're going to talk about public safety, for example. In 2012, of course, Congress authorized $7 billion for the build-out of a nationwide public safety interoperable broadband network. And this long overdue initiative will provide first responders the ability to share critical information, and that can be the difference between life and death. Not only for them, but for the people that they are trying to protect every day. It's got to be everywhere, including rural America, if it's truly going to be nationwide. And of course, we're going to hear also from Kelly about the need to upgrade to next generation 911 services that will improve public emergency communication services for our increasingly mobile society. People need to be connected with advanced 911. That'll give the public the ability to transmit text and images and video data to the 911 center, which they will then be able to relay to first responders. And FirstNet's an important part of making sure that first responders have the ability to receive that information. You know, and we talk about the golden hour in rural America, where that first hour after an accident may be the result between death or disability and the ability to get the care you need. And when there's longer distances between places, people need that information quickly. So we'll hear from Kelly Merriweather about some of the challenges that you see in rural Texas and how those are representative of what happens across the country. And we want to do everything we can to support you and your efforts to keep people safe. And we appreciate what you do, and we want to support that. At the same time, remember that means that there's another tenant out there. There's another customer who wants to be able to use these broadband networks, and that can help put one more piece of the puzzle together in terms of building the business case. Another big part of the business case is agriculture. Big sector of the economy that is a good example of M2M, or machine-to-machine applications that are opening up a whole new world of connectivity. And it's a big part about what we're talking here today. It's, of course, rural America is the breadbasket of the world. In my part of the country, South Dakota, we have a lot of corn, wheat, but all over, cotton in Arkansas. I mean, there's so much of a great economic story there. 36% of the world's exports are coming from America's corn growers alone, for example. I can go on and on. There's companies like John Deere, who we'll hear from today, that are employing incredible innovations to help farmers deliver more efficiency, bigger yields, in a significant boost to the national economy and to our balance of trade overseas, a very positive story. And smart grid is another tremendous innovation generating increased demand for wireless broadband. Through wireless technology, the smart grid can increase energy efficiency, hold down costs, and connect thousands of devices, everything from silos to kitchen appliances, to keep them running smoothly and cost efficiently. So these are really wonderful innovations that we have. And of course, speaking of smart, we have, let's not forget how wireless broadband has transformed educational innovations like digital textbooks that bring subjects online. Kids can relate to it. My kids today complain that they can't get broadband every single place they go, but if they lived in rural areas, they'd be frustrated a lot of the time. But they need not only gaming, which unfortunately my kids do probably more of than they should, but we do force them occasionally and regularly to do a lot of their homework, which they quickly benefit from having the knowledge of the world at their fingertips, and interactive online lessons and apps that function like a personal tutor are really changing the way that we educate our kids and how they're getting prepared for the future. So we'll hear from John Winhausen about President Obama's Connected Initiative, which aims to build out high-speed internet connectivity to schools and train teachers. So that'll be something that wireless networks will play a big role in the initiative. So I think students and teachers are becoming more and more accustomed to this new culture of learning. They'll need connectivity on the go if it's going to work, whether it's on their ride home, which it might be longer in rural areas, or on the team bus to a game, the towns, 2 towns over. Wherever they are, students need, and of course they demand, as us parents know, access to broadband. You know, who knows, the next Steve Jobs may come from rural America, but he or she will never reach their real potential if they don't have access to broadband, if they can't get that inspiration. And so with the administration's emphasis on high-speed wireless broadband for schools and libraries, I think we're going to get closer than ever to that goal. Another driver of demand is healthcare. We know that healthcare has what we call in economics inelastic demand curve. People want it and they won't give it up. And as internet becomes an opportunity to take these vast distances and eliminate them, basically low population densities have traditionally made healthcare very difficult, particularly specialty care, which isn't economic in rural areas. But with wireless broadband, you can bridge that distance, and I've seen it firsthand through our distance learning and telemedicine program at RUS. Doctors in larger cities thousands of miles away can bring specialty care into small rural clinics. It can help people not only in case of trauma when there's an emergency, but for regular appointments when the older person might not be able to make it to a distant hospital. They won't have to go through all the trouble of getting out there. They can get that treatment right where they are. And telemedicine applications like wireless remote monitoring can save time and money, eliminate the need for multiple doctor visits. So another demand driver, and something that with these increasing applications, we're going to see more and more need for wireless broadband networks. But we know about the need. The point is that these will drive the business case so that they can actually get the connections they need. Which brings me to transportation, another area where initiatives such as positive train control, which would bring wireless technologies to monitor trains and help prevent accidents, is creating a new opportunity for wireless broadband. Implementing PTC across thousands of miles of railroads in America will take a lot of wireless infrastructure, something we actually love at PCIA. Congress set a deadline of 2015 to get the system in place, and there's currently a lot of discussion about the best way to get there. And PCI members are certainly in a position to help get this system built cost effectively. And I think what we can do is leverage other users who may want to share that new infrastructure. Again, we're talking about a business case. If there's already a bunch of wireless infrastructure that has to go up, mandated by law, what a great opportunity to allow other users to locate on that, which will help hold down costs for the railroads, but also hold down costs for everybody by spreading the cost of infrastructure and creating opportunities there. So these are just a sampling of the many ways that wireless technology is not only impacting lives of Americans, but building the business case for broadband at every school, clinic, farmhouse, firehouse, train. In each scenario, the demand creates new wireless broadband customers, which in turn can stimulate demand for new broadband applications and devices. We'll hear from Michelle and Diane Gite, hopefully, if Diane is on the way, about the challenges and opportunities that these new demands create. He runs VTEL, which is a leading rural wireless broadband deployment in the Green Mountain state of Vermont, and I emphasize the word mountain. Very difficult to serve, but again, you know, he's seeing how that works. You know, just a minute on the sort of business model for infrastructure. Take the example of a cell tower, how that works. If you have a cell tower, you build that. In the old days, you used to build it, each phone company build it for their own use, or each telecom provider, but increasingly they realized that others could locate on that, and then a new industry developed, which is called the neutral host model, so that these companies that own the towers will then rent them out to anybody that uses them. So the first tenant on a tower helps pay for it, the second one is profitable, the third one is more profitable, etc. So the more tenants you can get on a wireless facility, the more of a business case that you have. So if you have, a new tenant in the first net, if you have a new tenant that's using it for heavy agricultural use, if you have everybody using it so the carriers want to be there and more carriers will locate in the rural area, all of a sudden you've got a business case for shared infrastructure, and we can get broadband where we need it. So these new tenants create a win-win situation, and it's all happening because of wireless broadband. But of course, to accommodate this emerging demand, we need policies that encourage both innovation and investment. And the private sector has invested an enormous amount, continues to invest in rural America. But it takes significant capital to do that. And the government has stepped in where needed using existing funding mechanisms to support that build-out. NCIA's broadband stimulus program is helping to expand and improve middle-mile networks throughout the country. RUS loans and grants are primarily directed to the last mile to homes, businesses, and farms. And incidentally, 4G wireless is a very cost-efficient last-mile solution for broadband, as we'll hear, at speeds that are comparable to or even faster than online broadband service. The RUS program, I think, goes hand in hand with the Universal Service Fund in delivering broadband, both wireless and wireline, to the nation's most hard-to-serve areas. Thankfully, more and more policymakers, chief among them President Obama, recognize how essential broadband, in particular mobile broadband, is to America's future. And Congress has authorized significant investment in America's infrastructure so that they can get broadband everywhere. The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act I mentioned is a fine example. 2013 Farm Bill is being debated now in Congress, and I'm hopeful that'll be reauthorized, and the broadband loan program will be reauthorized to support broadband deployment, as well as a distance learning and telemedicine program. And the FCC, meanwhile, is trying to modernize regulations for 21st century communications. Just last Friday, the Commission took a first step toward improving connectivity in schools with its NPRM on reforming the E-rate program. And that's just one side of the Commission's multifaceted approach to making broadband available and a reality as part of the National Broadband Plan. And it recognizes the need for mobility. Rural Americans want mobile and wireline broadband, and USF needs to help them get both. So this is not going to be easy. I'm under no illusions, having fought this fight for so many years. Fortunately, last year's Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act, which set aside funding, as I mentioned, for long overdue public safety network, also had a variety of wireless siting provisions that can get mobile broadband networks built quicker and more efficiently. It's an incredible boost for wireless deployment. It's hard enough to build networks in rural America. We don't need additional regulatory barriers that create costly delays standing in the way of progress. What you find is that when you have regulatory delays, the capital will flow elsewhere. Because there's not enough of it to go around as it is, there's a demand for this build-out in rural and urban America. Those communities that are helping, in fact, the federal government has helped. The Congress has enacted legislation. The FCC has put in place a shot clock. I'm encouraged that there's a recognition on the federal level, and certainly our speaker, Chairman Mark Pryor, recognizes this, that broadband is an engine for economic growth and sustainable economic development and job creation. They put policies in place to back that up. And now we're going to the states. The states are enacting legislation. We've had a very successful year in the states, trying to get them to improve the ability of capital to flow to their areas, investment to flow to their areas, so that people can have broadband. I've seen it firsthand. You've all seen what can happen when broadband gets to a place. I think that continued emphasis on policies that encourage investment is essential going forward as the technology improves, the demands for mobile video and streaming and applications not yet thought of, in addition to the ones we talked about today, are going to drive the business case. America's historically risen to the challenges to connect this big nation, be it, as I said, highways or railroads or postal service, but now it's going to be broadband. And just as all of those previous huge undertakings in infrastructure were public-private partnerships, so too the private sector is leading the way. But as in the case of the past, the government needs to facilitate and help that process, as they did the railroads, as they did the canals, as they did the highway system. Private capital will build it out. Just as my grandfather was an engineer, helped build the federal highway system. Today it's private companies like Michel Gitte's company that is building out these networks. Maybe using a federal loan, but using private capital largely to get it done. so we can, I think, use our resources in this country to feed the country and feed the world, but we need to make sure our farmers have access to broadband, as we'll hear from Mark Llewellyn from John Deere, so that they can maximize their yields. And you'll hear today that I'm really happy to report that the business case is getting better, that the wireless industry is poised to deliver the promise of mobile broadband to our rural communities, and with a strong leadership of people like Senator Pryor, of Congress, on both sides of the aisle, who have enacted important legislation on a bipartisan basis to improve the climate for investment and the ability to invest. I'm confident that we can really build a strong broadband future for everybody in rural America. And we'll hear more today about how we're going to get that done. So thank you for coming out this morning. Now,